We continue a series that we started a few weeks back looking at marriage by the book. And we are looking at Old Testament couples, primarily couples that have been in the book of Genesis. We took a little diversion last week and we went to Exodus because we wanted to talk on Mother's Day about raising godly children. And so we talked about Moses' parents and how they made an impact that changed everyone's lives because they recognized the potential in this baby, Moses, and they made sure his life was spared. This morning we go back to Genesis, and we want to talk about Jacob and Rachel. When we talk about Jacob and Rachel, we want to deal with conflict. Jacob and Rachel had a lot of conflict in their lives. Now, one thing I didn't do during first service that I probably should have done is to give a little bit more background on Jacob and Rachel. Jacob was Isaac's son, and Jacob had a twin brother by the name of Esau that he had cheated out of his birthright and out of the blessing of God. He had to flee for his life when Esau found out that Jacob had robbed him not only of his inheritance, but had robbed him of his blessing. And then Jacob eventually came to God after wrestling with an angel of God all night. His name was changed to Israel. And so when we think of the nation of Israel, when we think of the different tribes of Israel all through the Old Testament and into the New Testament, it all goes back to this one stubborn, obstinate man, this one very selfish man by the name of Jacob. Jacob's parents left the area that they lived in and moved back to the area of Abraham. And because of that, there was some distance between Jacob and the wives, and I use that in a plural sense, the wives that Jacob married. We want to talk about a relationship, not just with Jacob and Rachel, but we also want to talk about a relationship between Jacob and his first wife, Leah. This is the fourth in a series that we've entitled Marriage by the Book. Even mature, talented Christian couples can find themselves dealing with conflicts in various degrees. Is there any couple in this church that's never had to deal with a conflict in their marriage? Oh, put your hand down. Is there any Christian in this church who has never had to deal with a conflict with another Christian? Not really. We've all had struggles. We've all had conflicts. We've all had different opinions that have caused us, not seeing eye to eye, to turn around and to have very bitter and ill feelings toward the other person. But there needs to be resolution. I want to share a case in point. We're going to talk about Jacob and Rachel, but I want to go into the 1700s. I want to go into our recent past. And believe me, when you look at the scope of human history, the 1700s is not very long ago. I'd like you to look at this portrait. The portrait. There we go. Thank you. As we look at this portrait, I want you to realize that this woman's name is Mary Vasile Wesley. A very attractive woman. A God-fearing woman, obviously. She was the wife of the great British preacher John Wesley. John Wesley was the founder of the Methodist Church. And the Wesleyan Church also follows John Wesley's teachings and principles. Obviously, they bear his name. In this depiction of John Wesley's wife, Mary Wesley, we see a woman who seems to be fulfilling every part of the role of a faithful minister's wife. Just look at her. She's quiet, unassuming. But I want you to pay attention to a close-up of the portrait. Let's do the close-up. In her lap, you see an open Bible. And in her hand, you see a locket. Depicted in the locket, and I know that's a little blurry because it's a portrait of a portrait, but depicted in the locket is a small portrait of her husband, John Wesley. What a devoted wife. What a wonderful pastor's wife. It didn't happen that way. John Wesley married Mary later in life. John Wesley was devoted to his ministry. He was devoted to preaching the gospel. He was traveling all over, not just England, but even Europe, sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. And later in life, he decided it was time to marry. And so he decided to marry Mary Vazeal. She was a well-to-do widow. She was a mother of 4 children. And so when John married Mary, he was immediately a father of 4. They were married in 1751. 7 years later, by 1758, Mary Vazeal Wesley left John Wesley. They separated. She was unable to cope with the competition of his time and his devotion. She saw him as being married to his ministry and not to her. The Methodist movement was growing by leaps and bounds, and people were demanding and asking and requesting and begging John Wesley to travel throughout the region and to go over into Europe and preach the message. And so she had very little time with her husband. On the times that he happened to be home preaching, or on the very rare occasion that she would accompany him on a trip, she sat in the front row and she made faces at John Wesley. And that's why she sits in the front row, so you can't see what she's doing to me. On one of those trips, Mary, or Molly as she was known, returned home, and she left John Wesley for good. They were completely, totally separated. They weren't divorced, but their marriage was in shambles. So, how do we deal? How do we deal with the differences that surface in marriage? Do we careen? Do we cheat? Do we complain? Or do we care enough to work things out? I want to say this. You who are not married, this applies to all of us. How do we deal with differences we have with other people? Now, although they did not handle things well, Jacob and Rachel can teach us some valuable lessons in dealing with conflict. First of all, we need to understand the reasons for conflict. One of the reasons for conflict were in-laws. You ever call your in-laws outlaws? Did you mean it? Some people actually mean it, and some people just say it for fun. Jacob and Rachel had some problems. The biggest problem that Jacob had in wanting to marry Rachel was Rachel's father, Laban. Now, we need to understand in Genesis 26 that Isaac left the area where Rebekah's family was from and moved toward the area that he grew up in, where Abraham had settled. They were having problems between themselves, even the preceding generation. And so, to give themselves distance, and since their herds and their flocks were multiplying, Isaac left and did not stay in the same region that Rachel's family was from, or that Rebekah's family was from. And so we find that when it was time for Jacob to marry, Rebekah, his mother, did not want him marrying a Hittite woman who was very godless. She would prefer that he would have married someone from their own people who had a faith in God. And so we pick up the story of Jacob and Rachel actually in Genesis chapter 29, and I just want to read verse 23. We'll be kind of scanning through a couple chapters here. In chapter 29, verse 23, we find these words. When morning came, there was Leah. And so Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" Jacob went back to Laban, who was his mother's brother. And he went to Laban and he said, "I need to marry someone that's in our faith and in our family." And he looked at Laban's 2 daughters. The older one was Leah. The younger one was Rachel. Rachel was the one who just got to his heart. And he said, "I will work 7 years for you if you will give me permission to marry Rachel." And Laban said, "Oh, absolutely. Welcome to the family, son." And so tirelessly, we see Jacob working for 7 years before he was allowed to marry Rachel. The wedding day came. And there was a lot of festivity, and there was a lot of excitement, and a lot of enthusiasm. And the bride came to the groom veiled, and there was obviously a lot of good wine there, because that night they spent their honeymoon together. And the next morning, when Jacob woke up, the woman he had married had removed her veil, and it wasn't Rachel, it was Leah. And so he worked 7 years, and he got the wrong bride. But for Laban, he said, "Hey, I couldn't marry my younger one off before I married my older one off, so I had to make sure that Leah was married before Rachel would be eligible. I'll tell you what, Jacob, if you really want Rachel, work for me 7 more years, and you can have her too." And that's what Jacob did. And he worked a total of 14 years to get the woman he really wanted. A poor relationship with in-laws can be a constant source of conflict. And so in-laws can be a problem. But also spiritual differences can be a problem. Over in chapter 31 of Genesis, I want to look at verse 19. Genesis 31:19 says, "Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a 6th son." Oh, I'm in the wrong chapter. I was in chapter 30. Chapter 31, verse 19. It says, "When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods." And then skipping down to verse 34, that same thought continues. "Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in her camel's saddlebag and was sitting on them. Laban searched through everything in the tent, but found nothing." Not only were there conflicts with in-laws, there were spiritual conflicts. Even though Jacob went back to get a wife from his own clan and his own family, she was an idolater. She worshipped idols. Her father worshipped idols. And the Bible warns us about not being yoked with unbelievers, or about being yoked with unbelievers. It takes extra strength to remain faithful to the Lord when we're living with someone who is hostile to biblical values. Now, that may be the case. It could be that you as a believer have married someone who is an unbeliever. And that causes stress, that causes strain. Or it may be that 2 people were unbelievers, and one has come to Christ, but the other has chosen to remain apart from the church and not be involved with this faith community. That causes a strain. And spiritual differences absolutely can cause conflicts. But feeling unloved is one of the biggest conflicts that couples face. Going back to chapter 29, remember, Jacob had married Leah first, but Jacob loved Rachel. Leah was his wife, but Leah felt completely unloved. Look at verses in chapter 29, verses 31 through 34. It says, "When the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Leah had become pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, 'It is because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now.' She conceived again, and she gave birth to a second son, and she said, 'Because the Lord has heard that I am not loved, he gave me this one too.' And so she named him Simeon. Again she conceived, and she gave birth to a third son. 'Now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons.' And so his name was Levi. And then a 4th son, whose name was Judah." Over and over again, she was able to give Jacob the boys that he wanted. But in turn, she received no love. Mother Teresa said this: "Loneliness and the feeling of being unloved are the greatest poverty in the world." The feeling of being unloved, coupled with loneliness, can be the greatest poverty in the world. Too many couples have every material success around them, everything the world could ever tell them they would want, but they're aching for love, and there is none to give. Feeling unloved causes conflict. Infertility causes conflict. We see this happening with Rachel. Leah was the one who was the baby giver. Rachel could not conceive. Look at chapter 30, verses 1 through 8. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister, and so she said to Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." Jacob became angry with her and said, "Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children?" Then she said, "Here is Bilhah, my maidservant. Sleep with her tonight so she can bear children for me, and that through her I too can build a family." And so she gave him her servant Bilhah as his wife. Jacob slept with her, and she became pregnant and bore him a son. And then Rachel said, "God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and given me a son." And because of this, she named him Dan. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. And then Rachel said, "I have had great struggle with my sister, and I have won." So she named him Naphtali, and on and on. Well, and then Leah gave Jacob her servant, and she was bearing children. Have you ever wondered why there's 12 tribes of Israel? It's because Jacob had 4 wives who were in competition with each other. All of them giving themselves to him, and all of them bearing his children. Infertility, though, was the cause of Rachel's anguish. In Rachel's day, a woman's self-worth came from bearing children to her husband. And if a woman was barren, she was considered cursed. In Genesis, when Adam and Eve were given instructions, one of the instructions from God was, "Be fruitful and multiply." That's repeated in Psalm 127. It's considered a tremendous blessing when a woman can bear a child for the man she loves. Rachel could not. There were also sexual problems. And we might as well be upfront and honest about this because it's in the Scriptures, and sexual problems are problems in marriage. In chapter 30, verses 14 and 15, it says, "During the wheat harvest, Reuben went out to the fields, and he found some mandrake plants, which he had brought to his mother Leah. Rachel said to Leah, 'Please give me some of your son's mandrakes.' But she said to her, 'Wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you also take away my son's mandrakes as well?' And then she bargained with him. 'Very well, he can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes.' And so they worked that out together. What's the big deal about mandrakes? Mandrakes were a narcotic, and mandrakes, if consumed by a woman, were considered to allow a woman to have a tremendous sexual drive and be attractive to her man. And so this was the issue. They had some problems. There were problems between men and women back then. There's problems that continue today. It's very hard to maintain a healthy sexual life in a monogamous relationship, a relationship between a married man and a married woman, married to one another. But if someone is intimate with another outside the marriage, it's nearly impossible to maintain a healthy sexual life. So there's a lot of reasons for conflicts. But there are responses to conflicts. There's ways we can respond to conflicts. Some are good and some are bad. Some people explode. They explode through emotional or physical abuse. They rant and they rave and they throw things and they curse and they hit. Some people respond to conflict through tears. Tears can be healthy at times, but they can also be used to manipulate people and impede communication. Tears can stop the conversation when the conversation really needs to take place. And some people respond in silence. They just shut up and they clam up. I want you to understand how we can misunderstand some key words that can result in silence. Now, what we're going to do is something that was done in fun. It was given to us a few years back by Larry Judd, who is a very close personal friend. He was a Sunday school teacher, and he received this communication via email. He read it to a Sunday school class, and I wanted to share it with you now, just as a lighthearted way of seeing what happens when we miscommunicate. In order to do this, I've asked my lovely wife to assist me, so you can understand words women use.
Fine.
This is the word women use to end an argument when they feel like they're right and you need to shut up. Never use fine to describe how a woman looks, because this will cause you to have one of those arguments.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. This is half an hour. It's equivalent to the 5 minutes that we ask for at the end of our football game before we take out the trash. So it's really an even trade.
Nothing.
Nothing means something. And you should be on your toes. Nothing is usually used to describe the feeling a woman has when she's wanting to turn you inside out and upside down and backwards. Nothing usually signifies an argument's going to last 5 minutes and will end with the word fine.
Go ahead.
Raised eyebrows. This is a dare. One that will result in a woman who gets upset over nothing and will end with the word fine.
Go ahead.
Normal eyebrows. This means I give up. Or do what you want to do because I don't care. You'll get a raised eyebrow, go ahead, in just a few minutes, followed by nothing and fine, and she will talk to you in about 5 minutes when she cools off. It's not actually a word, but it's a nonverbal statement that is often misunderstood by men. A loud sigh means that she thinks you're an idiot at the moment, and she wonders why she's wasting her time standing here with you and arguing over nothing. A soft sigh. Again, a nonverbal statement. Soft sighs mean that she's content. Your best bet is not to move or to breathe so she can stay content.
That's okay.
This is one of the most dangerous statements a woman can make to a man. That's okay. Means she really wants to think long and hard before paying you back for whatever it is you have done. That's okay is often used with the word fine and in conjunction with raised eyebrows.
Go ahead.
At some point in the near future, you are going to be in some mighty big trouble.
Please do.
This is not a statement. It's an offer. A woman is giving you the chance to come up with whatever excuse or reason you have for doing whatever it is that you have done. You have a fair chance with the truth, so be careful, and you shouldn't get, that's okay.
Thanks.
A woman is thanking you. Just say you're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Now, this is much different than thanks. A woman will say thanks a lot when she's really ticked off. It signifies that you have offended her in some callous way, and it will be followed by a loud sigh. Be careful. No, we didn't need that one. Be careful not to ask her what's wrong after the loud sigh, because she's only going to tell you nothing. Kalita, thank you for helping.
Fine.
All in jest, all in fun. But it reflects some of the conflicts that we have and some of the ways we deal with our conflicts. So how do we resolve these conflicts? How do we solve these problems? We solve them through honesty. I just want to turn to Ephesians chapter 4 and just read through a couple verses here real quickly. In Ephesians 4:25, we have Paul saying, "Therefore each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully with his neighbor, for we are all members of one body." Let's be honest with each other. Nothing undermines truth more than deception. And it goes beyond lying to telling the truth about how you feel. We should try not to hurt feelings, because when we hurt feelings, we stockpile resentment. Let's be honest. We also need to work on our timing if we're going to resolve conflicts. Ephesians 4:26 says this, "In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are angry. Deal with the problems as they arise." To resolve conflict, we also need to be sensitive. In Ephesians 4:29, Paul said, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." Let's be sensitive to each other. This is so much more than Paul saying, don't curse and don't tell dirty jokes. And sometimes that's what people take that verse for saying. Yes, that's part of it. But we need to watch our harsh criticism. We need to be careful about hateful threats to our spouses or to anyone else. We need to be sensitive. But then ultimately, we need to forgive. In Ephesians 4, verses 31 and 32, Paul said this, "And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, for whom you were sealed from the day of your redemption." Verse 31, "Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you." We need to make up our minds to forgive. We need to behave in the proper manner. And we need to trust God to do His part. Now, in thinking about this, I want you to pay attention to the following words that are going to be on the screen. I was wrong. I am sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. I was wrong. I am sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. These 12 words will help keep relationships together. If we can say these from our heart, they will help restore relationships, whether it's relationships between a husband and a wife or relationships between brothers and sisters in Christ. I was wrong. I am sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. If we are going to cope with conflicts constructively, these 12 words need to be expressed frequently. To cope with the consequences of our sin in our lives, we need to use these same 12 words with God. I was wrong. You died in my place. I am sorry. I'm repenting of my sins. Please forgive me. Your death and your resurrection give me hope and life. I love you. We need to use these words with God before we use them with anyone else. We need to have a relationship that's working with Him. We have been in conflict with God because of our sin. He has come along to resolve that sin issue. He's come along to redeem us and make us His own. And that happens when we confess to Him that we were wrong, that we're sorry, that we need His forgiveness, and that we love Him. And as we do that, His Spirit enables us to be able to have a forgiving and a new relationship with other people. Are there conflicts in your lives? Maybe it's between you and God. Maybe it's between you and your spouse. Maybe it's between you and someone else. Conflicts can be solved as you would pursue the Lord with all your heart, as you would follow Him, as you would recognize how much He loves you. You can start fresh, and you can start today. If you need Christ in your life, we invite you to come forward as we sing this as an invitation to come and accept Christ, to be baptized into Him. If you need to rebuild relationships, we'd love for you to step up and talk to us privately. And we'll talk with you about maybe where those conflicts have destroyed things and what resolution is out there. Let's use these 12 words, first to God and then to each other. And if you're ready to make that decision to follow Jesus Christ, to say those 12 words to Him, then why don't you step forward this morning as we stand and as we sing this song. Let's stand together.